Welcome back for another video. Today, we're going to be doing draft grades, talking about all the different draft grades for every division. You're going to have different videos every day of the week going into next week. Today, we're going to start with the AFC South. Now, of course, starting in the AFC South and being a Colts fan, we're going to start with the Colts, okay? And obviously, going into the draft needs, or the team needs for them in the draft were quarterback, wide receiver, cornerback, and offensive line depth, specifically right guard. Obviously, the Colts ended up drafting Anthony Richardson with the number 4 overall pick. So the question becomes, what is realistic for Anthony Richardson, both as a rookie and in his career? And I think as a rookie, you have to temper expectations. Like, everybody's going to talk about the 13 starts in college. And that factors in to what you talk about with him, the inexperience. But you look at the raw talent, like everything you hear about him is like what's wrong with him per se can be fixed. Like, you can fix the accuracy. The coaches that were brought in for the Colts, they feel like they can make Anthony Richardson an accurate thrower of the ball. They can fix his mechanics. They can make him more accurate. But you look at the things he's able to do. Everybody talks about how elite his pocket presence is. Obviously, he has the mobility, but his pocket presence and being able to have that feel inside the pocket and be able to get away from guys while he's inside the pocket and still be able to make plays. And I think for somebody with so little experience, for people to say that he's elite doing that is pretty impressive and is a really good sign. So, what do I think his future is? One of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, obviously, again, I'm a Colts fan, could very well be biased, but I really believe Anthony Richardson, with the right coaching, can be a star in this league. There's a pretty good cast around him, and one of those guys is Josh Downs, who may be the steal of the draft, definitely the steal of the draft for the Colts. You could definitely argue that the 4th-round pick, defensive end, defensive tackle hybrid. I'm not even going to attempt to say his name, but he's out of Northwestern. But he's a freak of nature. At 285, ran a 4.49, I believe, 40 at the combine. He's supposed to be really good and much needed depth for them. But to get Josh Downs in the 3rd round at pick 79, I think that's really important for the offense. I think that's really important for the future of the organization. You have a couple of receivers, obviously Michael Pittman Jr. Is he going to be on the team in the next couple of years? Who knows? But you also have Alec Pierce on a rookie deal. Now you have Josh Downs on a rookie deal, and that's important. Obviously, Anthony Richardson's on a rookie deal, so you could build that team around him. You can pay guys like Michael Pittman Jr. if you want. So I think the Colts overall, for me, get an A+. They came into this draft with 9 draft picks, ended up with 12. They got the quarterback for the future. They got another weapon. They drafted 3 corners, and then undrafted free agent was the right guard that they needed coming out of Alabama. So I think the Colts, obviously, I'm giving them an A+. Could be biased, could not. I know PFF also gave them an A+. CBS gave them a B, which seems a little low. I feel like they kind of nailed this draft. And if you look at the Jaguars' team needs going into the draft, it was right tackle, cornerback, safety, interior D-line. They really needed to rebuild that defense going into this draft. And part of my grade factors into the fact that they needed to rebuild the defense. Their first 3 picks were on offense. And not to say that they're bad picks, right? Like, they got the tackle that they needed with 27th overall pick. They got a tight end for maybe the future. Who knows if Evan Ingram's going to be there long term? Probably not. So they got a tight end in a draft that was very deep at tight end. And then they went and got a running back to be behind Travis Etienne. So all 3 of those picks make sense. From a certain standpoint, you're putting pieces around Trevor Lawrence to help him be great and help the offense work in a league where you have to score 30-plus points if you want to make noise. And I just think even though they ended up going with 7 picks on the defensive side of their 13 total picks, I just felt like they should have hit on defense earlier in the draft. Again, a deep tight end draft. They could have gotten a tight end later. A deep offensive line draft. They could have gotten a tackle later. I think you could have gotten edge guys instead of getting edge guys in the 4th and 5th round. You could have gotten those guys in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. So for me personally, I'm going to give them a C+. When you look at the guys that they got, and what they did with the draft compared to what they really needed to do with the roster. They went up in draft picks from 9 to 13. That's great. But everything else didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And I think that docks it in my mind the way they went about their draft. I just would have done it differently. So they get a C plus for me. Moving on to Titans. Coming into the draft, they needed wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, linebacker. They had to replace a couple of linebackers. And what they hit on in this draft, not terrible. They only came into this draft with 6 picks. They came out of it with 6 players drafted. They take with the number 11 pick Peter Skoronski, who a lot of people saying very well could be the best offensive lineman in this entire draft, let alone tackle. Obviously, Taylor Lewan not there anymore. You needed a guy, they got a guy. With the second round pick, they trade up a couple spots, end up with Will Levis coming out of Kentucky. And obviously, the question is Will Levis the future quarterback for the Titans? Is that the guy that they needed? Now, you have to realize that Derrick Henry probably not going to be around a whole lot longer. So, Will Levis is going to be the guy that taking them into the next era. That's what they are drafting him for. They still have Tannehill, so Tannehill can play right now, and he probably will. While Will Levis, kind of gets humbled. If the reports about him are true, sounds like he could use a little bit of humble pie, and that'll happen under Vrabel. That'll happen with him sitting a year behind Ryan Tannehill, and I think with what he's able to do, like, and if you put the right coaching around him and fix him up, like, sure, he can be that guy. But there are a lot of question marks with him, and that's why he slid out of the first round into the second, and probably won't be starting immediately as a rookie. And the last real note with them, again, they only had 6 draft picks, but it feels like drafting a running back last year and then drafting another running back this year, and all the talks we've heard about, Derrick Henry could be traded this offseason. We thought it happened before the draft, and it didn't. But the question is he still going to be traded at some point this season? Like, if the Titans aren't doing well, and presumably we're looking at the Panther, or no, I'm sorry, not the Panthers, the Jaguars running away with the AFC South the way it's looked so far. And so, if the Titans aren't really competitive, do they trade Derrick Henry before the trade deadline? I think that's very possible to happen. I'd love to know what you think about that. Let me know down in the comment section. But that feels inevitable. You're drafting rookie running backs in back-to-back drafts. It feels like that's the way they're going, and they're getting prepared for a future without Derrick Henry. And it could happen sooner than later, especially following a season where you only have 6 draft picks. You need to find a way to get draft capital to rebuild the future of the franchise and be able to keep up with teams like the Jaguars, like the Colts if Anthony Richardson ends up being great, like the Texans if CJ Stroud ends up being great. And talking about the Texans, their team needs coming into this draft were obviously the quarterback, interior offensive line, linebacker, DB. We could keep going and going throughout positions, but when you talk about like the prominent, what do they need to focus on the most? That, in my opinion, was what I thought they should look at was quarterback, interior offensive line, linebackers, and defensive backs. By the way, I give the Titans a draft grade of B. I thought it was solid. They didn't really have much to work with. They didn't gain any draft capital during the draft, even though they did trade up to get Will Levis. So they were making moves, but ultimately, pretty bland draft. Good for their future, but we'll have to see how everything plays out to really grade this draft for the Titans. But bouncing back here to the Texans, it was obviously a good move to draft C.J. Stroud. There was a lot of questions. Would they go quarterback? I think that was all just blowing smoke. I think there was never any truth to that. I think it was always going to be Bryce Young, especially if you've watched us throughout this offseason. I've thought all along, no matter what was said, Bryce Young won to the Panthers. I know Frank Reich. I know what he's going to do. And Bryce Young goes to the Panthers. C.J. Stroud was the inevitable number 2 in this draft. I think the real question was who the third quarterback was going to end up being in this draft. C.J. Stroud was a smart move, but then the Texans shocked the world, except for Daniel Jeremiah, who predicted this to happen. But they traded their 2023 first and second round picks, which ended up being, I believe it was the 12th and the 33rd pick in this draft. And then a 2024 first and third for the third overall pick, where they drafted Will Anderson Jr. And the way I started thinking about this is, are CJ Stroud and Will Anderson Jr. basically going to be to the Texans what Deshaun and JJ were to the Texans for a time? And obviously that didn't last very long, with JJ ending up with the Cardinals, and D Hop leaves, and then the Deshaun Watson thing happened. So it wasn't very long those two were together. They hope this one works out better than that one did, obviously, but it feels like they had the draft capital to be able to do this, because of the Deshaun Watson deal that happened, and they went and got two guys that they really feel like they can build their future around. And I think they have a really good coach. I think D'Amico Ryans has put some good coaches around them, and I think this is a good place to start. We've kind of been steadfast here on this channel about the fact that the Texans probably not going to be crazy competitive. They're definitely going to be better in 2023, but not, competing in the AFC. And I think that still holds true, but I think the future is very bright for them with what they were able to do. But if you look after that move, getting CJ and Will Anderson back to back at 2 and 3, they hit on some needs for sure. Again, they kind of needed everything. They need to rebuild a little bit of everything, but I think they got some good talent. Nothing that really sticks out a crazy amount. But again, filled some holes. To me, it's a B-minus draft. Again, quarterback of the future, D end of the future. Everybody, you look at the tape, Will Anderson Jr. is that guy, pal. So let me know down below how you would grade each of the AFC South teams for their respective drafts. Don't forget to keep coming back for more offseason content. We'll see you for the next video.